welcome on in to another episode of Getting Wild with Terry and Friends, Hockey Edition. Today is the LA Kings Day. We are going to go through the LA Kings on what they did this offseason here. Picks from Dave is wondering if this is the NBA breakdown for Sacramento Kings. No, unfortunately not. I don't know if anybody would want to watch that show, but no, we are here talking about the LA Kings today. And we'll just jump right into it here. And I have it split into 4 sections. So I will start, and then we'll kind of just go through the 4 sections here, starting with additions and subtractions. So LA, their major offseason move was to acquire Kevin Fiala from the Minnesota Wild. They gave up Brock Faber as well as a first-round pick. And they also acquired Phoenix Copley to be their third goaltender. And Toby Bison, I don't have much information about him. So LA didn't really do a whole lot this year in the offseason besides Fiala. But when we take a look at their possible lineup later on, they have so many prospects and so many potential players to put in the lineup that it's okay that they kind of took it easy in this offseason. But Kevin Fiala is definitely a good player. He's going to help their offense right away. The thing with Kevin, he's very streaky. He's a very streaky player, and he also is not the best defensively. He is going to give up turnovers, and they're going to be frustrating ones. But he's also going to score a lot of goals. I do see him taking a step back, leaving Minnesota and coming to LA, at least at first. He usually tends to have kind of slow starts. But once he gets going, if he does get going and plays well, he'll be good down the stretch for the Kings, which is what you want, a player good down the stretch. If you look at the subtractions, Dustin Brown retired. So he is gone. Brock Faber, as I said, traded to Minnesota. Olli Mata, Troy Stetcher, Austin Strand, Martin Frick, Andreas Anastasio, and Garrett Sparks all left the team. So I guess their most impactful player there would be Dustin Brown, who's been with the organization for years and years. I'm happy with the trade on Minnesota's side of it. Obviously, I'll give the Minnesota aspect. Brock Faber and a first-round pick, which was used to select Danila Yurov, which has high potential. So him and Brock Faber, 2 good pieces for the Wild. And I think Kevin Fiala will probably get off to a slow start, but I do see him doing well down the stretch for the Kings. We'll go next to Nick here. What do you think about the additions and subtractions of the LA Kings this year?
Yeah, I do like the addition of Kevin Fiala. I think he's kind of like that offensive punch that they needed last year that they lacked. They were a pretty defensive minded team last year, and Fiala is definitely an offensive piece they needed. Dustin Brown, losing your captain is never fun, or used to be captain. We know that Doughty is actually the captain now. Mata and Stretcher, those are two defenseman depth pieces that I think that you don't like losing those, but it is what it is. And Athanasiou actually had some really bright moments with them last year, so that I'm guessing they're gonna need to find someone to fill that spot. Overall, I think it's about even, their adds and their losses. Fiala kind of makes up for the couple players that did lose. So I feel like this team's going to be about similar to what they were last year.
All right. Ian, what do you think about the additions and subtractions for the Kings?
Yeah, I mean, they were 20th last year. And by the way, before someone says that's misspelled, that actually is the way you spell Phoenix Copley. It's a funny inside story if you've heard of it with his name, but that is the correct spelling. So don't blame Terry for that. It's the correct way to spell it. But the Kings are 20th, or last year, I should say, they were 20th in goals for. Less than 3 per game. So you can understand why they were pursuing a little bit more offense in the offseason, and they're hoping to get that with Kevin Fiala from the Minnesota Wild. Terry's right, though, about him being streaky. There's no doubt he could go 10 games with 1 point, and then all of a sudden he can score like a goal in like 8 or 9 straight games. That's what you get a lot with Kevin Fiala. But no, they're suddenly starting to form, I think, a nice little forward group here with the LA Kings in terms of long-term upside. I think Adrian Kempe, we know what kind of season he had last year for the Kings. Marvelous, 35 goals, 19 assists. 54 points last year for the LA Kings, gets the lucrative 4-year, $22 million extension in the offseason. So this team offensively, with Fiala there, with Kempe, I thought Trevor Moore showed you a lot in terms of being able to contribute offensively. Kopitar still got a lot left in the tank. Philip Deneau got his offensive game back a little bit too. Remember, it dried up in Montreal for him. Comes to LA last season, his first year with the Kings, and boy, he got his offense back. Victor Arvidsson can chip in offensively too. Hopefully he stays a little bit healthier this year. Quentin Byfield's going to take another step forward, I think, and get better. Definitely, I think the LA Kings are definitely a team offensively. They're going to be improved. And you look at last year, 44 and 35 to the under. I think that's the biggest takeaway I have here with the team is that, I think they're going to be more of a higher scoring team, not just leaps and bounds better offensively, but I think they're going to maybe have a few more overs. They're going to get value with their game totals next year because they're usually line 5.5. That's been, the trajectory with LA King totals the last few years. So I could see some value with the over. As far as the subtractions, Mata was the one starting to, like, this is the guy that was always in the starting defensive group for the Kings last year. He was in every night. You don't have him anymore, but they're going to hope a healthy Alex Adler comes back and takes his spot. But here's the issue with Adler. You go all back to 2011. That's the last time we got an 82-game season out of Alex Adler. I mean, this guy has been one injury after another, essentially, for the last 8 years. You haven't been able to rely on him very much for durability. I think he can still play. I mean, he's 36 now, but I think when he's healthy, he can still be an above-average defenseman still in this league. But that's the big question at the end of the day. So, the loss of Mott, I can live with it. But if it's going to be Adler not healthy, that's a weaker defense. If it's going to be Adler staying healthy next year, then I think it actually could be an upgrade from Olli Mata. But that's a big if. Either way, I think you're going to see a little bit more offense in this team based on what they added, what the and the subtractions from last year.
For sure. And Jonathan Quick getting another year older as well. Bryant, welcome on in. Your Kings. We're talking about your Kings. What do you think here about adding Fiala and the subtractions?
Yeah, no, I think I was very happy. I think all three of us, excluding Ian, obviously, we were all on doing a show together when it happened. I was ranting.
I remember that.
Yeah, I was ranting about some baseball pick, and Nick was like waving his arms like Kevin Fiala's the king, and I was like, what? But no, I'm very excited to have Kevin in LA. I know you've talked about it, obviously being a Wild fan. He has his moments where he can disappear, and then he can go 7 games in a row where he's giving you points, he's giving you goals and all these things. I think LA was so desperate though to have more offense, somewhat proven offense, that they almost kind of had to. Their prospect pool is deep. So giving up Brock was, it is what it is. They have been bad for so long that they amassed enough talent that they could afford that. They're still very, very, very deep down there. So I'm excited to have Kevin. I think he helps a lot. Most people don't know this, but entering the playoffs, the Kings were the second worst, I think, in terms of goals for last year. So anyone that can put the puck in the net was very much welcome this offseason. And I look forward to having him on the line with Kobe and Adrian Kempe. So I'm excited. I think there's a lot of value, as Ian mentioned, on taking the Kings to score a lot more goals and be much more of an over team as opposed to last year. Conversely, they sucked scoring, but they were also the second best goals against team. So basically last year, if you were smashing unders left and right with the Kings, that was the way to go. That was the way to go. Whether they won the game or not, generally speaking, that was just the way to go. And they played in a division with the Flames and the Oilers, and held their own defensively for the most part. There were a couple of aberration games where the Oilers just, well, they have the best player in the world. And he did some of those things, and he showed that, and that was pretty much the difference in the playoffs. But yeah, I think ultimately though, as you look forward to the season, I think that they'll be better offensively. Even marginally is going to be much more significant, especially in terms of betting. I think you can trust them a little bit more on the money line. I think that guys like Quentin Byfield, Sean Durzi, they need to take steps forward. I think that's kind of the reason why they didn't go out and do anything else besides add Kevin Fiala. It's because Rob Blake kind of is expecting some of these young kids to grow up. And it's kind of where I think that's really kind of the overall outlook on the Kings is they expect some of these younger kids that they've had for a while to grow up. They've got a bunch of veterans that they think can usher them along. And ultimately, I think that's kind of where it's at. I think that there's a lot of value if you're into futures. I personally, being a fan, I am going to put my money where my mouth is. I think the Kings finish second in the division this year. I doubt that they'll win the whole division, but I think with Calgary losing some pieces, I feel a lot better about them finishing second in the division and maybe causing a little bit more ruckus than they did last year in the playoffs. So,
all right, we'll definitely get your futures here in a little bit.
There is one thing I want to touch on the Kings offense real quick that I just looked up because I remember this from last season. This Kings team offensively, they were a decent offensive team for creating chances. They were fifth in the NHL in expected goals last year. The only thing is that they had the worst goals for above average number, where they had 32.62 more expected goals than actual goals scored last year. So if you think that if you play those type of numbers, they should positively regress and score more goals this year just on that alone.
Yeah. And one thing that negatively influences that, Mark, is sometimes bad puck luck, sometimes terrific goaltending, sometimes goal posts, sometimes just fanning and missing a clear grade A scoring chance. You just fan on it, you miss your opportunity, and there's countless examples of that where there's teams that are generating these quality looks time and time again, and they just can't finish. And the hope for LA is a Kevin Fiala joining the team helps them be a little bit more clinical, be a little bit more surgical, bear down when you've got those kind of chances. And hopefully Fiala helps that. And another thing, when I say maybe look to some overs with the Kings, I'm not just talking their full game totals, but their team totals as well next year. And I know Nick is a big team total better in the NHL. Yep. You can you're going to probably see a lot of Kings games next year where their team total is going to be like 3.5 with minimal juice. You might even sneak out a 2.5s. With the LA
Dogs
next year. Yeah. So those are going to be good things to look at, I think, coming into next year.
I would also second that. My biggest gripe, I think, with the team last year was the lack of execution on the power play. They were horrendous on the power play. And I remove my fandom. Objectively speaking, I really feel like there were probably 6 or 7 games that I can think of off the top of my head that LA would have won if they executed better on the power play. And I can point to like 6 of them, and they were horrible. And I think losing Drew,
27th in the league, 16% with the power play last year.
Horrible. I'm telling you, it was bad. They were really bad, and obviously losing Drew is a big deal. Drew's been a mainstay on that power play for years. He helps out a lot there. But even if you just add in Kevin Fiala's power play goals last year, he's like second on the team already.
Yeah.
Literally, like he's second on the team. If he was to slide in with his power play goals from last year, and you compare it to everyone on the team that we had last year and everyone that's returning, he would basically be like second or third on the team already. It's that in itself is something that I think that they have to work on. It's something that is very important. And I think that just obviously, like you said, lends itself to team totals and overs and stuff like that, that LA, they struggled on so much last year. So
for sure. We'll now take a look at their top prospects and upcoming free agents and their cap situation as well here. So if we're looking at the cap, 80,000. Sorry, 80,161,667. So they have a little bit over 2 million in cap space here if they did want to add anybody. Top prospects: Akil Thomas, Martin Chromiak, Samuel Fagemo, Alex Turcotte, and Brant Clark are their top prospects here. Looking at what's going to be coming up after this year: Jonathan Quick, Alexander Adler, Brendan Lemieux, Trevor Moore, all unrestricted free agents after this year. And then Rasmus Kupari, Elias Anderson, and Tobias Bornfort, all RFAs. So obviously, Bornfort and Kupari will definitely be things that the Kings will focus on, or players the Kings will focus on getting re-signed for sure. Elias Anderson, will have to see exactly where he fits in. But overall, pretty good cap situation. And upcoming free agents. Could we see Quick leave LA and go to a different team? That would definitely be interesting. But we'll go to Ian next. What do you think here about the top prospects and upcoming free agents?
So there's no doubt there's no doubt at all. The LA Kings right now have a top 5 prospect pool in the NHL. They do. I mean, in terms of depth of prospects, in terms of potential for impact at the next level, long term, they've got it. They've drafted extremely well, and now it's just a question of how quickly can these guys crack the NHL roster. You know, they've already sprinkled a lot of these prospects into the lineup the last couple of years with Carl Gruntz, with Quentin Byfield, of course. Arthur Caliaev really took a huge step forward for them last year. You know, they've still got Elias Anderson waiting in the wings. What if he takes another step forward? Gabe Vilardi, who's already had a cup of coffee with the Kings, but I think there's a huge opportunity for potential with him. And then there's that list you see on your screen right now with Akil Thomas, with Martin Chromiak, Alex Turcotte. Brant Clark could be a really special defenseman long-term for the LA Kings. So this is a team that's right up there. The Buffalo Sabres, Minnesota's drafted well. Columbus has drafted very well the last 3 to 5 years, and the LA Kings are right there with teams like that have drafted very well, that have a plethora of forwards and defensemen specifically that are going to make an impact in this league probably long term. Again, in terms of the free agent situation, Trevor Moore, a UFA. This is going to be a good guy to bet from a player prop standpoint. Anybody that saw my hockey shows last year knows that Trevor Moore props were something I mentioned routinely. And you got a guy that had his breakout season offensively that's now fired up beyond belief, knowing he might get paid in the offseason if he has another good year for the LA Kings. So Trevor Moore is definitely someone that I think could make a huge impact for them, playing for a new contract. Brendan Lemieux, also UFA. Alex Adler, I think probably it's going to be his last year with the Kings. He's going to be 37 after this year. They're not going to bring him back. And, and I just mentioned how he's unable to stay healthy and stay on the ice. Just 41 games last year. So I doubt Rob Blake, is going to be calling the phone of Alex Adler, say, hey, want a new deal? I don't think that's going to be happening. So Jonathan Quick, big decision there. I mean, a guy that had a sort of a turn back the clock season last year. It was his best year in forever. Stayed on the ice, stayed healthy, and I thought his best season in a few years. But can he keep that up, especially when you've got a quality young goalie that I think in Cal Peterson, who's going to be wanting some more starts this year for the Kings. So Quick, I think, is one of those 50-50 propositions. I think a lot is going to depend on staying healthy and having another productive season in net for the Kings this year. The RFAs, I think they'll find a way with Kupari, Anderson, Bjornfot to try to keep them. But this is definitely a year where you're going to see the LA Kings have to make some tough decisions going into next year, especially with Quick. Quick's been a LA King lifer. It wouldn't be easy to part ways with him, but certainly Trevor Moore and Quick are going to be those two guys that you'd like to bring them back if you can, but circumstances are probably going to dictate whether that happens.
For sure. And if you look at their cap space, they only have $2 million right now. And the cap is not expected to rise very much for a couple years still. So, yeah, they'll definitely have some decisions to make coming up. Nick, or we'll go to Bryant next. Bryant, what do you think here about the top prospects, upcoming free agents?
Yeah, as I mentioned in the previous segment, I think it's very deep. Ian kind of validated that, talking about how he feels about it, where it's ranked among some of the other teams. They went through a stretch where they were very bad, and they stockpiled talent, and they did it exactly what they were supposed to. The Ontario Reign have did a pretty admirable job developing most of these kids, and I think that's again, and I mentioned this as well. I think that's why you didn't see them go out and do too much else besides adding Fiala, because they have a lot of these kids here, and it's more of the future isn't far away type of mindset, I think, in LA. And it's all right, some of you guys need to start coming up and earning your keep. Like, you really need to kind of show us here what you're made of. Let's see what's up. So guys like Akil Thomas, I really like Alex Turcotte personally. I watched a few Reign game last year, and I really enjoyed his play. He's a terrific little two-way center type. But yeah, I think that ultimately that's kind of where the line is drawn at, is you see guys like Trevor Moore, we made some excellent plays, scored some very timely goals for us. There were a couple games where we were on a slide and he came out and played excellent and set the tone for us, and we were able to, break a losing streak and so on and so forth. He's from California. So I think he absolutely is going to be juiced up this year to play, shine, see if he can get a deal. I don't know if that's with LA, but I think him having played for a California team, he sees money. Money is dangling right in front of his face. Another year like he had last year, and I think he'll get him a nice little payday. So I think that's really the only one that I'm worried about. I think Quick comes back just because it's Jonathan Quick. I think he'll take a reduced payday. Maybe he goes elsewhere, and then he comes back and signs and retires as a King, as we see often in sports across the landscape. But I don't see too much value in signing him anything past like a year on a year-to-year basis, because he is 36 and injuries and stuff like that. And you've already signed Peterson to an extension as well for $15 million that starts this year. I can't see Peterson signing that without the expectation that he's going to get more starts going forward. So he has to be better to warrant those starts. But yeah, so I like the positioning of where everything is, and I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of these guys up during the season. Simply because, at what point do you stop hugging onto them as prospects and let them play with the big boys? Kind of defeats the purpose. If you're not going to play them, you need to trade them. You've got a nice little grouping. You can trade them for someone very meaningful. And so it's either you play them or you trade them. That's kind of where we're at. I think they're at that developmental stage where it's no longer about developing them. It's now let's see what you got and show us in the NHL. So
for sure. One other team I could see Jonathan Quick going to, and you may call me crazy with this one, the New Jersey Devils. That's a team closer to home. He was born in Connecticut. I know that could mean absolutely nothing, but I could see the Devils as a team that could potentially look at Quick.
I wouldn't say that was actually correct. I mean, that's, when you put it that way, that makes a lot of sense. I think ultimately it doesn't really matter if he does leave. He's gonna sign that typical one-day contract and retire as a King. I think he would just want to play out, until he feels like, all right, I'm done. Like I'm officially done, and so on and so forth. I hope, like I said, as a Kings fan, I hope he just rides it out and stays here in LA and accepts, okay, all right, it's time for the young guns opportunity, and doesn't really fight it too much. But if he bounces, I understand it. Guys are competitors. At the end of the day, these are professionals. They want to play. They don't want to just sit there. So,
yeah.
You took a look at the blue line situation for the Kings. There's a lot to like here. If Drew Doughty's back healthy and playing at anything close to what we've seen from him in the past, that's huge. And you look at just the absolute impact at just their first significant look in the NHL, the way they both played. Mikey Anderson and Sean Durzi. on
Yep.
the blue line. Outstanding,
Yep.
both of them. And look, they had to play more minutes. Their ice time was way up because of all the absences on the blue line. I remember Matt Roy was banged up. Sean Walker missed a bunch of time last year for the LA Kings. They might get those guys back too. And all of a sudden, the young guys feel more confident because, look, they've played more minutes. They've played in bigger situations. They've played against now some of the better players on the opposing team because they've had more responsibility that they've had to pick up from the injuries of some of the other blue liners. So this is a good situation all around with the Kings blue line, that now all of a sudden these youngsters have gotten playing time, important minutes, playoff experience as well from last year against Edmonton. So that blue line really is rounding into form as a blue line that keeps on getting better.
Yeah, they got guys like Dursey got absolutely blessed into NHL playoff experience by having to face Connor McDavid and Draisaitl. And it just wasn't fun. But
even if you get your ass beat, you'll be better off for it.
100%. Absolutely. And they had some moments where they, we went up in the series and they had some games where they played really well. And then, game 7, you saw where, okay, all right, they still have a lot of room to grow. But ultimately, like you said, I think it's much easier and it's better for you to get your butt beat by top 5 player in the world and learn from it than to not play at all and be thrown in the fire in the middle of the regular season and say, hey, you just go figure it out. So,
for sure. Nick, what do you think about cap situation, prospects, upcoming free agents for the Kings?
I don't know too much about prospects. I don't really follow the prospect pools or anything like that when it comes to hockey. But looking at the upcoming free agents, I think Jonathan Quick being a free agent at the end of the year, you're going to see more from Cal Peterson. He is, I think, your franchise goalie going forward. They signed him to a contract that proves everything you need to know. This could be Jonathan Quick's last year, or he can move on to another team. Either way, I see this as a spot where Jonathan Quick is not going to get as many starts as he did last year. I remember last year was a 1A, 1B type of thing with Jonathan Quick. It's going to be more of a 1-2 now with Peterson, I think, being the starter. Peterson looked like the better goalie last year, in my opinion, honestly, up until they put Quick in the playoffs because he's got the playoff experience. So I definitely think that when we look at it, Jonathan Quick, this may be his last year in LA. Adler's not coming back. Trevor Moore, we'll see. Brendan Lemieux, they can go with or without it. He's not a huge needle mover at all. But unfortunately for the LA Kings, they don't really have the cap space to go out and get anyone else. So we'll see what they do. I do think we'll see more from Cal Peterson this year, though. That's one thing that I do take away from that.
All right. And then we'll look at their possible lineup. It was actually hard to do a possible lineup for the Kings because there's so many different players that could be in so many different spots. But we'll look at what I came up with here for possible lineup. What I did here, I did 5 lines. So there's an extra line here. Obviously only 4 lines, but they have lots of players. Kopitar, Kempe, Arvidsson, Fiala, Danault, Iafallo. That's a pretty good top 6. The bottom 6, we could have Rasmus Kupari, Byfield, Caliaev, Moore, Anderson, Dolan, Lemieux. And then on the outside, possibly looking in, Elias Anderson, Velarde, Lizotte. They have a lot of forwards that could really – they have depth. They have a lot of young depth here for LA. How these players perform is obviously going to be huge. But if these young players take step forwards, this team could get scary quick. Just looking at what they have here. If you look at their defense, Tobias Bornfort, Drew Doughty. I'm not sure of Drew Doughty's injury. I'm not sure exactly how long, if he's going to be ready for the beginning of the season or if he's going to be out for a little bit of time. I'm not exactly sure. But Mover, Walker, Adler, Jordan Spence, another good young player coming up. Sean Dursey, Matt Roy. They still have good defensemen. And then when you look at the goaltending, Quick, Peterson, and Phoenix Copley. So LA
not expected to miss any regular season time. Drew Doughty expected to be ready for the regular season, and for all indications too, he'll be ready for the start of training camp. So it doesn't look like there's any worries there.
There you go. So yeah, that's great news for LA to have him ready for the beginning of the season. But yeah, LA has a pretty nice looking lineup here. We'll go to Bryant first this time. What do you think here about the Kings lineup?
Yeah, no, I'm very excited. There's one player in particular that I'm very hopeful for, and outside of Jersey, it is Fiala. He had some moments last year. Very, very, very good speed. I was petitioning for him, hopeful for him to replace Anthony Cu at moments, but Todd just wasn't. He wasn't trying to uh, bench Anthony Cu into the playoffs, which I'm like, oh, okay, it only took you X amount of games to do that. But I generally like the top six. The top six is very good. I think you nailed it with the fact that if there's some of these guys take another step outside of the Kopitars and the Kemps, and obviously I think Fiala is 100% going to be on that first line. But guys like Arvidsson behind him, Deneau, and things of that nature, it's gonna be a lot of fun. Gonna be a lot of fun. I'm looking and I'm begging for them to just finish more. That's really the biggest thing that I think separated them from being a little bit more of a threat come the playoffs. I think we could just hope that we could mug Edmonton. And while it worked for a little while, ultimately you have to score. You have to put the puck in the net, and they couldn't. And I think another year with some of these guys getting seasoned up and just being a little bit more clinical, as we've said on this show already, can be the difference. Depth is very key, and having Drew back is very key. Only thing that I'm scared about is they allowed, I think they had a very high rate of allowing like high danger goals when Drew was on the ice last year. I don't know if that was really just more of like an aberration or something to kind of monitor. But ultimately, I still think Drew's going to be Drew. And having him is infinitely better than not having him. And I think that's pretty much where it's at.
All right. Yeah, if LA was going to make some cap room, really, it would have to be Kopitar or Doughty that they would really look. I guess Quick as well, leaving. Yeah. But if they really wanted to make cap room, it's Kopitar and Doughty that's eating those big chunks. Nick,
Drew's here for another 5 years, though, so I can't see them doing that. I think crazy enough, it would probably be Kopitar.
Hey, I don't think the Kings trade either, but just hypothetical if they wanted to make cap space, because these young guys coming are going to need contracts. They're not going to be cheap. We'll go to Nick next. What do you think here about the Kings' possible lineup?
Yeah, it's an interesting lineup. I mean, we saw Philip Deneau have a good season offensively last year. I like that second line with Fiala and Iafallo. I think Fiala is probably going to be up with up in the first line probably instead of Arvidsson. It'll be Kopitar, Fiala, Kempe. I think that could be a decent line. I really liked Quinton Byfield last year. He was somebody that I did place goal props on a line. He was always in the 300s, and I hit a few of those. He was someone I really liked looking at. Arthur Caliaev with Byfield, I think, is a decent duo there. I don't know much about Kapari. The blue line doesn't look bad. Looks like they have a decent depth there with Dursey and Roy being your 7 and 8 guys. So I think the blue line looks fine for them there. And then I like their goaltending. I think they have a good duo with goaltending, and that's something we have to look at here with the NHL, especially when it comes to during the regular season. You need more than just one goalie. I mean, we've seen some teams ride goalies like the Rangers and the Lightning, but we've also seen other teams have success like the Bruins, where they have 2 good goaltenders. And I think that's very important to have 2 good goaltenders, and that's what the Kings have here. So I do think that they can be competitive with this lineup this year. We'll get to it with the futures. How competitive? That's a big question mark, but we'll see how. I think they can compete though.
All right. Yep. The future section is next. Ian, what do you think about the Kings' possible lineup?
Definitely better offensively with Kevin Fiala there. If Kempe, you think we can rely on him to be 30 goals moving forward. I think we saw enough to say that's not a flash in the pan. He's got that kind of great finishing ability, great offensive instincts that we can expect, 30 goals and a lot of the time with him Kopitar clearly has shown he can still play. If Arvidsson's healthy this year, there's a guy that can get you 20 goals in a season at least. Danault found his offense last year. Hopefully that's the same this year as well. Now it could go back to the way it was in Montreal at the end, and suddenly he's not able to finish. But, if he maintains at least something of what he did offensively last year, that's going to help. Byfield, I think, is going to take a step forward. Certainly, I think going to have more ice time, more responsibility, more opportunity. If I have to project what's going to happen with him. Arthur Caliaev was very solid last year, and he improved as well. You see the others' names on these lists. You might see more of a look with Velarde, Anderson, Kapari. This is going to be a very, very competitive training camp. And I don't bet preseason hockey, but this could be a team that's a good bet in preseason games because there's going to be so much roster competition going on, especially up front with the LA Kings. So it's something to keep in mind if you get involved with NHL X betting. But at all. The blue line, like I said, if Doughty's back healthy, and he looks like all indications are he's ready to rock here to begin the season, which is good to see. If Sean Walker and Matt Roy look to be back and ready, you got Sean Dursey and Mikey Anderson in particular, got significant playing time and experience that's only going to make them better. This is suddenly a above average blue line, in my opinion, with all their pieces in place. And, I think Nick made a great point that Todd McClellan and the Kings and Rob Blake, they all want Cal Peterson to get more of the starts this year. And unless Cal Peterson is just absolutely shits his pants in training camp and preseason, which I don't think is going to happen, I think he's going to get more starts and he'll be the number one guy this year, because I think they're trying to just gradually lighten the workload not phase him out, but, lighten the workload and see what they've got truly in Cal Peterson, because, this is a guy that you've got to get a hard, concrete evaluation done here. Is this guy going to be our long-term number one goaltender? And the only way you're going to find that out is if you give him the requisite number of games and starts that a guy in his spot with other teams, a number one goalie, would get. All right. So I think for that reason, you're going to see him start a lot more. But no, this lineup forward group's better offensively. The blue line, especially because they had to put their young guys in big situations last year, is going to be better and deeper. And the goaltending's capable. So, last year was just the beginning of what I think is a ascension, no pun intended, for the LA Kings.
Yeah, I don't even have Mikey Anderson on here. That's the issue, is that the Kings have a lot of young depth. So it was actually kind of hard to make up their lines because there's so much that could happen. Preseason will definitely be interesting for them. And we will go on to the final part of the show, and that's looking at the last 5 years and futures of the LA Kings. So here we go. Their point total this year currently is 95.5. They're minus 200 to make the playoffs, plus 170 to miss the playoffs, plus 500 to win the division, and plus 3,500 to win the cup. If you look at their last year, 99 points in 82 games, kind of similar to their first round exit in 27-18 when they had 98 points in 82 games. The 3 seasons in between, obviously no playoffs. But kind of looking at what they've done, they added Fiala. I expect the young guys to take a step forward. I think getting 99 points, I think they can get 96 this year. I don't really see the Kings taking a big step backwards. As they did say in the Anaheim Ducks show, I do think this is going to be a very close division. So I do think we are going to have a lot of close games and a close race for the playoffs. But I do think the Kings will be there. Obviously, minus 200 is not a price you really want to pay to make the playoffs. But I would look at their point total over 95.5, which is minus 115. To win the division, I'm not sure the Kings are there yet. Obviously, with the young players they have, if they all take a step forward, the Kings could definitely win this division. There's definitely a way for them to win this division. I'm just not confident in it myself, but I do think they'll get over 95.5 points. We'll go to Ian next. What do you think here about the last 5 years and their futures?
Yeah, it's kind of like with Anaheim, where if I'm betting the Kings and I like more than I don't like with the Kings this year entering this new season, I go with the point total over before anything else. I don't know if they're division winners. I don't think they are, because I still have to put Edmonton and Calgary and Edmonton with Jack Campbell. Let's keep that in mind too. Much better goaltending situation than anything they had last year. Calgary, certainly they're bloated for bear again. Even we thought things were falling apart. Kachuk, Gaudreau gone, 215 points gone from your lineup last year with just those two guys departing. And sure enough, they plugged the holes and then some. Huberdeau, Weegar, Kadri, Calgary not going anywhere. We mentioned Anaheim could be a little bit better this year. Seattle, I think, is going to be a little bit more competitive this year. So it's a very, very tough Pacific division, top to bottom. So I'd rather go with the point total over. I ain't laying minus 200, obviously, to make the playoffs, and I'd probably pass on division and cup futures. One other thing I want to mention, too, with this Kings team, number 3 last year in profitability in the NHL in the regular season. There were only 2 teams that made more money for their backers last year than the LA Kings, the New York Rangers and Terry's Minnesota Wild. So how about that? Top 3 teams last year in terms of profitability, units won on the season. As far as the LA Kings from a game-to-game value standpoint are concerned, that's where I'm interested to see if there's an adjustment made, because I think they could be top 5, top 10 profit. Like if they're going to price the Kings lower in the pecking order like they did last year because, they just barely got into the playoffs, and, because we don't think this is a sign of things to come this year, there could be more value on the LA Kings. However, if we also start to see them, in games where, let's say they're playing San Jose, we think is going to be the worst team in the division, or Arizona, and suddenly we see LA in that minus 250 range against teams like that, it's a sign that the LA Kings, maybe they're starting to price them like the better team that they are. So whether they can maintain that 3rd place in terms of profitability this season, I think is going to be solely based on where I have the Kings priced versus where the odds makers do. I have an idea of where I would put the Kings game to game, opponent to opponent. If they price the Kings like they did last year, you're going to be able to make a ton of money with this team again. However, if they make that adjustment and the improvement that I think they've made last year, and also how good they might be this year, then there might be not quite that value and probably nowhere to go but down in terms of profitability for the Kings last year to this year.
All right. It's interesting to hear that the Wild are one of the most profitable teams. That doesn't even include all the live betting I did when they were down by 1. A lot of profit made there as well. We'll go to Nick next. Nick, what do you think about the LA Kings futures, their last 5 years? What do you think about their futures this year?
Yeah, and I do remember them being a very profitable team last year because I was on them so much last year. It felt like if they played 82 games, I feel like I bet them at least 60 times. Like
49 to 99 points, a 50-point improvement in one season will do that. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, granted, the 49 points was in 56 games.
Correct.
But you got to keep that in mind.
Improvement.
Yeah. Looking at them this year, 95.5. They're saying they get less points this year. And I can see it not judged on how the team looks, but judged on how their division looks around them.
Yep.
Calgary's going to be fine. Edmonton's going to be better. Vegas is going to be better than they were last year because Vegas was plagued with injuries and all that. They were not a good team last year. They're going to be better this year. Vancouver is going to be much better this year. I think that this Kings team is going to be good. The only thing is I think their division's better. And I think that we see a Kings team that maybe finishes 5th potentially in the Pacific, with Calgary, Edmonton, Vegas, and Vancouver finishing in front of them. I think that they're going to be neck and neck with Vancouver and Vegas. Like I think that's the type of competition, and Edmonton and Calgary are going to be on the top of that division. So with that being said, I feel like this is a division that could cannibalize themselves, and they go under 95.5. And it's not because of how this team looks itself. It's because of who they got to play. And when you're playing those teams for as many games as they will, I think that this is a spot here where they might go under. And I think there might be value at plus 170 for them to miss the playoffs, because that's not even including the Central Division, which has Colorado, St. Louis, Minnesota. Oh, yeah, and Dallas and Nashville. I think Dallas takes a step back, but I like Nashville to take a wild card spot. And if I think that LA has the potential to finish 5th, I don't think that the Pacific gets 2 wild card spots. So I think there might be plus value or decent value on them to miss. I don't think they miss, but I'm saying there's teams that are going to be competitive around them there to a point where they just may be a good team on the outside looking in. We saw that last year where we had a 94-point team miss the playoffs last year in the Western Conference. So, and a 92-point team missed the playoffs last year. The Western Conference has good teams. So this is an interesting conference. 95.5. It went down, and it may have went down for a reason because everyone else improved around them. So I would lean under. I would lean to miss the playoffs at plus 170 if I had to bet it. I'm not going to be betting either of these. This is a very tricky team to bet futures with. But if I had to, I'm sorry to be pessimistic here to your team, Bryant, but I think their competition around them is very tough. And this could be a little bit of a disappointment.
There is some truth to that. There's some truth to that the Kings benefited last year from Vancouver falling apart, firing a coach midway through the season, Vegas being banged up, falling apart down the stretch, couldn't win a big game to get in the playoffs. Obviously, they benefited from that. They benefited from a bunch of teams in that division struggling down the stretch. Seattle playing like an expansion team, unlike Vegas did. Anaheim being poor, San Jose being awful. They benefited from all of that. But now this year, you're going to see Anaheim's better. You're going to see Vancouver a full season under Boudreau. They're going to be better because of that.
Yes.
Vegas, if they stay healthy, and they bring in Cassidy as their head coach, can they be better? And all of that is going to be stumbling blocks and obstacles, greater obstacles for the Kings this year compared to last year. Yep.
I think Vancouver's one of the sneakiest teams, and we'll get to them. I don't know when the Vancouver show is, but they're a dark horse for me. So.
Yeah, so after the Pacific Division, we're actually going to go to the East and go to the Metropolitan. Then we'll make our way back to the Central before finishing off with the Atlantic. Nick, I noticed when you were talking about the powerhouse Central teams, you forgot Arizona and Chicago.
Oh, crap, my bad. Yeah, the Arizona Coyotes who are – yeah, no.
Bryant?
That's the tank for Connor Bedard duo right there.
Yeah, that's the Bedard battle right there.
Key preview to there. I think the Coyotes will be a better team than the Blackhawks this year.
I agree with that.
We'll get there, but I think the Coyotes will be better, and they'll have some young prospects that I'm going to be looking for to bet on props wise. So for sure in Arizona. Bryant, what do you think about the last 5 years and the Kings' futures for this year?
Yeah, those last 5 years were some of them were, it was not fun. My first ever hockey game and how I became a Kings fan in the first place was I was in LA and I was there the year that they won their first cup, and I was like, all right, this is awesome. And so that was my first experience with LA Kings hockey, and then I experienced both of them, and then everything just kind of tapered off after that, and those middle years were just not fun. But I was very proud of the guys and how they performed last year. Some of the guys that they've acquired through the draft, some of the mainstays from some of those teams, the Quicks of the world, Kopitar, Drew Doughty, they did an admirable job, and they've stayed the course and helped bring along some of this young talent. Some of the guys that have left and gone on other teams since. But I'm interested to see how things are going forward with so much young talent already in tow and guys just waiting for the opportunity. So I'm not sure how this next 5 years is going to go. But that's the perfect segue into talking about next year. I think that there is something to be said about the fact that they dropped our points total. And they didn't lose anyone notable, I think personally, and they added someone who is notable in Kevin Fiala, and they still went down. Odds makers said, we'll shave off 3 or 4 points compared to what you guys finished with last year. So I personally, I'm going to take the over on the point total, simply because I want to believe that they are going to be a better team, because they are going to be a better offensive team. Defensively, despite the fact that they didn't have, I guess, individually the talent as say some other teams in the NHL, they still performed pretty admirably as a defense. And I think partly, part of that has to do with the fact that Jonathan Quick played his behind off in the second half of the season. And it helped out a lot. And some of the younger guys took a little bit of a step forward after having played for X amount of games. And they did that without Drew. I'm not going to sit there and say that they're going to win. They're going to come home with 100+ points, but I think that they will basically level back out at roughly where they finished at. I have to see the other teams in the division take that step forward before I believe in it. The Kraken stole so many coins for me. I would probably be in a different tax bracket if I did not fade the Kraken as much as I did last year. The times I faded them were the worst decisions that I made that night betting. I don't know how they're gonna respond. I think like you said, the other teams in the Western Conference, like the Canucks, the Knights, the Stars, teams that we finished above. I do think they're going to get better. I do. But ultimately, I'm a believer. I'm a believer in this team. I'm not going to sit there and say, hey, Kings win the cup. But I think that they stick with their point total. I don't really know what to expect from the rest of the division. I think Edmonton wins the division. I'm not as high on the Flames as I was at any point last season because of some of the guys that they lost. But ultimately, I do think that they can crack just a hair over 95. So I am going to, when my book allows me to, I'm going to go pop that future bet in for that point total. And hope for the best.
All right. And that is the show, unless anybody has any final thoughts about the LA Kings here. No? All right. Tomorrow is the San Jose Sharks. So if we do have any San Jose Sharks fans watching tomorrow, I apologize in advance.
Finally get to rip a team. I'm looking forward.
I'll try to find something positive to say, but
you don't have to find positive for every team, Terry.
Yeah, well, it's going to be very difficult with the Sharks because they're lineup,
bad
organization. Everything. They're not even above cap. They're below, like they're above the cap limit right now with the team they have. So it's
bad
just
contracts.
Yeah, it's a mess, but we'll definitely get there tomorrow.
There's a reason why our buddy there, Doug Wilson said, "I've had enough."
Yeah, tomorrow's show will definitely be interesting. So make sure to tune into that.
It's like peace out.
Isaac's is happy to hear you rip a team tomorrow.
Big job ahead of him, Mike Greer, but I wish him all the best with it.
The Sharks also stole coins last year at times, though.
Yeah.
I need that,
especially against the Kings.
Yes, exactly. I can't talk too much crap because I think they won the season series last year, as a matter of fact.
Yes, I was against Nick. I was against Nick taking the Sharks against.
San Jose had a voodoo curse over the Kings last year.
It was ridiculous.
Some teams just do that. But that is today's show. Thanks everyone for watching. Hit the subscribe button if you're new to the channel. Smash the like button if you like the content. We appreciate all the support, and we'll see you again tomorrow for another episode of Getting Well with Terry and Friends Hockey Preview Edition. Have a good one, guys.
Go Kings, go.